Part 2. The Nest. Chapter 13. Norix Pass. Tahu activated his Kanohi How, coating his body in a rolling layer of energy, just in time to absorb a strike from a Korok hand shield. When the Bohrok recoiled, he deactivated the mask, swiftly cleaving off its leg, whirling around into a diagonal slash and severing its head before its body hit the rocky ground. He kicked the one beside it, breaking its defense to allow his sword to plunge through its chest. He wrenched the blade free with such force that two of its limbs came with it. He turned back to block an attack from another, which he responded by cleaving it in two. Two more Bohrok remained. He set his sights on the first, charging toward it and slamming it off its feet, causing it to tumble backward into the lava river behind it. It squealed and thrashed as its body was slowly incinerated while sinking into the bubbling lava. The final Bohrok snapped its head forward. Tahu weaved around its body, driving his sword into its back and lifting it up from the ground. He focused his elemental power into the blade of the sword, causing both the sword and the skewered Bohrok to burst into flames. When the burning pieces of the Bohrok slid off his sword, he extinguished the fire before scanning the area to admire his handiwork. The moment the meeting with Turaga Winawa had concluded in Ta Koro, Captain Jala had ordered all able-bodied Ta Matoran to help defend the village. With the protection of their famously efficient warriors, the heavy artillery left over from the Battle of Kininui, and the Turaga's shared knowledge, the Fire Village had remained unbreached, as they easily annihilated multiple increasingly large swarms of Bohrok with ease before they could reach the gates. Amidst their profound success, Tahu had grown bored. Once he ensured the Matoran could handle the village on their own, he decided to venture out, unsure of what exactly he was looking for. He was standing beside the Trenkram Break, little more than 6 miles west of the village, near the base of the Mangai volcano. He gazed far across the rocky and soot-glazed plains in search for more approaching enemies. Although none had emerged, it was only a matter of time. He turned northwest, where he caught a glimpse of white moving along the jagged path around the Mangai's base. He raised his sword and squinted through the smoke and ash polluting the air. He took a step forward for a closer look, where he was eventually able to make out the form of Toa Kopaka approaching his position. Tahu returned his sword to his back as he waited for the Toa of Ice to reach him.
Kopaka, what are you doing here?
Tahu asked.
I need your help,
Kopaka replied. Tahu paused.
What did you say?
Don't make me say it again.
I just wanted to ensure I heard you right,
Tahu said smugly as he crossed his arms.
You need my help?
Relax. I need everyone. You were just the closest one.
Tahu rolled his eyes.
Very well. What do you want?
I found an entry point to the Bohrok nest back in Kauai. There's far more than we ever thought. It's going to take all of us.
Where?
It's hidden within the base of Mount Ihu. I can take you there, or we can gather the others first. It's your call, but we have to move quickly.
Tahu spared a moment to make his choice.
If it's only a quick detour along the way to Kauai, I'd like to know what we're dealing with first. Lead the way.
Kopaka nodded before quickly starting back the direction he came. Tahu followed as they both broke into a sprint over the rocks and hills, wrapping around the base of the Mangai. Following a thunderous crash, Kopaka was forced to skid to a halt as their path was cut off by a sudden rock slide. The two Toa were ready to simply climb over the obstruction until a wave of lava poured down over it as it spewed out from the side of the volcano. The Toa looked up, finding a small group of Nuvok boring into the rock, creating the leak. Tahu drew his sword, ready to charge up the volcano, but Kopaka simply shot a series of ice spears toward the Bohrok, which caused each of them to lose their balance and tumble down the steep rock until they had all landed in the pouring lava.
Show off,
Tahu muttered as he returned his sword to his back.
We need to find a new path,
Kopaka said.
There's a canyon we can pass through just north of here. It's a straighter shot anyway.
Norix Pass. Bad idea.
Why? I've heard all the stories and reports about it from the Matoran. But we defeated Makuta already. I doubt he has much hold there anymore.
Defeated, not destroyed. He's still alive, and taking that path is far too risky. We already have enough to worry about without bringing him back into it.
We won last time. We'll win again.
We barely won last time, Tahu. It took all the strength we had. Clearly you need to focus more of that strength into not being an idiot. Best not to waste it.
What's wrong, Kopaka? Afraid of getting your neck bitten again?
No. I'm more afraid of getting incinerated because you're too impulsive to control yourself.
Well, if it comes to that, perhaps you could just cry under your shield again.
Kopaka stepped up to Tahu and pointed the tip of his blade beneath his chin as their masks nearly touched.
I'm not going through that pass,
he growled before breaking away.
We'll just take the long way to Gakoro first.
This is why I was chosen to lead the Toa. I'm the one willing to make the tough calls.
No, Tahu. You became leader because the rest of us were too tired of arguing with you.
So, you've accepted it then?
I'll accept you as leader, as long as you don't expect me to follow. I'm going to Gakoro.
Tahu shook his head.
Fine, let's go. We're wasting time.
No words were exchanged for the first several minutes of their journey. The pair began walking at a moderate pace until Tahu began to realize Kopaka was walking slightly faster. Not willing to be outdone in even the most trivial sense, he quickened his pace until he inched toward the lead. Kopaka sped up to prevent himself from being passed. This carried on until they were both moving side by side at identical speeds, practically sprinting without even realizing it. Their pace slowed to a halt once they neared the entrance to Norix Pass. The sweltering heat of Tawahi had very suddenly vacated, causing the atmosphere to become hauntingly cold as a howling wind speared the air. The path leading into the canyon was unnaturally dark, completely unaffected by the glowing lava streams nearby. Although he would never admit it, Tahu had started to understand Kopaka's reluctance to enter the pass once the same feelings of profound pressure that he had felt when he neared Makuta's lair had returned at the mere sight of the area. The long way around no longer sounded so bad.
We should keep moving,
Kopaka said.
Yeah,
Tahu replied, struggling to send the signals from his brain to command his legs to move. There was nothing that could possibly make the canyon any less inviting, yet he still felt a beckoning coming from within. He wondered if Kopaka felt the same, and the fact that the Toa of Ice had yet to continue walking toward Gakoro without him suggested he likely did. Tahu took a step forward.
Tahu,
Kopaka called.
What are you doing?
Tahu stopped, shaking the invasive feelings from his head.
Nothing,
he said, as he turned back toward the intended path, tugging Kopaka's arm away from the canyon as he passed him. Now resuming their course, both Toa felt the pressure leave their bodies as the heat of the Wahi slowly returned, a feeling that even Kopaka had welcomed. Their path was once again blocked, this time by a geyser of lava firing out of the ground. Kopaka raised his shield over his head as Tahu activated his Kanohi How. As the lava splashed around their bodies, a second geyser erupted, followed by a third. The cracks that were formed along the ground split further down, bursting open to make way for a small group of Tanakh to climb out from the black rock. The fiery Bohrok glowed bright as the molten lava dripped off of their bodies while they approached the Toa, even as more geysers and cracks began to sprout. Kopaka shot an ice spear to knock one of them back, while Tahu cleaved the next one open. They were both forced to move back as the ground was torn apart. For every Bohrok they killed, many more emerged. Soon, the pair found themselves retreating entirely, creating greater distance from the flood of lava that seeped toward them. More geysers burst, now from farther back along the path. More and more Bohrok began to appear, forming the largest swarm either Toa had seen thus far. Lava poured from both directions, leaving them with a single escape route.
The canyon!
Tahu called, falling back toward the shadowy pass. Kopaka growled in frustration before following behind. The instant they found themselves within the canyon walls, the sounds of screeching Bohrok and bursting lava geysers were drowned out by an unnatural silence. The pouring lava stopped its flow just outside, as though even it knew better than to enter the place of shadow.
It looks like the only way out is through,
Tahu said, peering into the harrowing darkness ahead of them. Kopaka kept a tight grip on his sword as he held his shield up.
Let's get this over with.
The start of their journey through Norik's Pass was unsettlingly quiet. Aside from their echoing footsteps and the howl of the stale wind, nothing could be heard. Neither the sun nor moon had any influence in the area. The sky above seemed to be missing entirely, forcing Tahu to take the lead with his ignited sword, which seemed to have a far smaller radius than it had previously, revealing little more than his feet beneath him.
This feels familiar,
Tahu said, barely speaking above a whisper.
We're in his territory. I can feel it.
Just keep moving. Stay focused.
We defeated him once already. He should be afraid we're here,
Tahu assured himself before thrusting his dimly lit sword forward.
Do you hear us? Makuta? We're back! You know what we're capable of. Let us pass!
Yes, Tahu. I hear you.
Tahu spun around toward the source of the voice, finding nothing. Kopaka was absent, and even the walls of the canyon had seemed to disappear. He was now standing in a dark void, one that he had experienced once before.
Are you gonna make me fight my demons again? Make me lose control? It won't work this time. It will,
replied the shadowy imitation of Tahu as it faded in from the darkness.
I simply need to adjust my approach. I don't have time for this. Where's Kopaka? He's fine, for now. Why do you ask? You're not worried about him, are you?
Tahu pointed his blade toward the shadow's neck.
Tell me where he is. I won't ask again. This is what I like to see,
the shadow said with a grin.
And I haven't even had to do anything.
Tahu grimaced, pulling the sword away.
You already tried this once. You failed. Just like you failed at everything else you threw at us. It's only a true failure if I learn nothing from the experience. In which case I have not failed. But can you say the same? You claim you won't give in to your anger again, but I can already feel it swell inside you, Tahu. You're already about to boil over, and I've barely said a word. It's pathetic. More pathetic than cowering in the shadows, or sending Rahi to bully the Matoran for you. It says a lot when you need to imitate me to feel threatening. Threatening?
The shadow repeated as it walked closer to Tahu. With each step, its stature greatly increased. Its body shifted into a more animalistic form, quickly sprouting wings, tails, claws, teeth, and horns from every side. This caused Tahu to step back and raise his sword in defense as the twisted and atrocious thing loomed over him.
You are the fearless Toa of Fire!
The monstrous shadow suddenly diminished back into the form of Tahu before continuing to speak.
It would take far more than sharp fangs and talons to threaten you. Besides, there is no greater threat to you than yourself, Tahu. So here I am. And I will be the greatest threat to you as well. Come out from wherever you're hiding and face me properly. Don't tempt me. You already have enough to worry about with the Bohrok running amok. You ought to listen to Kopaka and stay focused. My time will come again soon. And we'll be ready for you. You will not be able to stop what is to come. Controlling the Rahi was merely a glimpse. When I return, the island will crumble. Matanui will die and I will take his place as the true Great Spirit. You will try, but you will not succeed. Your very existence will be to serve me.
Tahu gripped his sword tighter, increasing the intensity of the flames as he prepared to strike. Before he could swing, the flames flickered away as the blade crumbled into a pile of dust. Tahu stepped back in surprise and confusion, holding nothing but the empty hilt.
Do you feel powerless without your sword? You'll grow used to that feeling.
Kopaka looked ahead to find he was alone. He glanced back, seeing a solid wall where he was certain the path had only just been. He continued moving forward, aware that Tahu's absence was likely a trick being played on his mind. He just needed to keep moving. The dead chill in the air transitioned into a crisp wind, one that he found welcoming. Up ahead, he could see a sliver of white light. He had reached the exit at last. He still saw no sign of Tahu, but he could do little more than hope they could regroup once they were free from the shadows. He sprinted through the canyon, watching the opening widen as he drew nearer. Finally, he broke free. He slowed his run as his feet crunched through the thin layer of snow. The sun's rays peeked through the gaps of the Kauai evergreys that surrounded him. He searched the area for Tahu, but found no trace of him. Against his better judgment, he decided the right thing to do would be to turn back and find him. But when he did so, he was unable to find the entrance to the canyon. All that was behind him was the snowy woods that seemed to span for miles. Looking ahead, he could see the edge of the forest just a short distance away. He reached the clearing, spotting a strange shape imprinted in the snow. Upon closer inspection, he found it to be the frozen body of Toa Pohatu lying on his side. The light of his brainstalk was little more than a dim glow, but he appeared to be conscious. Kopaka rushed to his side, kneeling down and placing his hand on his mask. Just as he did, the glow was snuffed out entirely.
No.
Kopaka gasped.
No, Pohatu. I can fix this. Just hold on.
He discarded his sword and shield behind him to prepare to lift the toa of stone from the snow. Just as he began to heave, he felt a harsh crack fire out from Pohatu's body, causing Kopaka to stumble backward into the snow. He sat up, finding Pohatu's head lying in his lap, separated from the rest of his frozen corpse.
No, this isn't how it happened. He didn't.
Kopaka could hardly finish his thoughts before tossing the head away as he scrambled to his feet. He felt a sudden wave of heat wash through the air. Checking his surroundings, he was standing in the center of Kokoro, where every last building had been consumed by fire. The Matoran screamed and ran helplessly as the Tanakh torched everything in sight. Hearing the soft crunch of footsteps, he looked back to see Matoro stumble toward him. The Matoran was burned almost beyond recognition as he weakly reached out for the toa before collapsing dead beside Pohatu. Amidst the chaos, he saw Taraga Nuju standing a short distance away, shaking his head in disapproval at the toa of ice before turning away and walking straight into the nearest blaze.
The cracks are showing, Kopaka,
called the voice of his shadow.
They're beginning to see your shortcomings.
Kopaka quickly scooped up his sword and shield and held them ready at the approaching figure.
No, Pohatu is still alive. So are the Matoran. But for how much longer? Pohatu is so careless. It's only a matter of time before he winds up like this. And Kokoro is already halfway there. Perhaps you had just been a little faster.
Kopaka shook his head before glancing back down at Pohatu's head. The sight had begun to lower his guard before his shadow very suddenly lashed out. Without a second to spare, Kopaka raised his shield. As the strike connected to its surface, he looked up to see Tahu bearing down on him as the surroundings faded away.
Watch it!
Kopaka called, shoving the other Toa away with his shield. Recognizing Kopaka's voice, Tahu pulled back in surprise that his shadow had vanished. He inspected his weapon, equally surprised that the blade was intact. They both glanced around, finding themselves back between the claustrophobic walls of the canyon.
Are you all right?
Tahu asked. Kopaka shook his head.
Are you?
No. Let's keep moving.
The ground beneath them began to quake violently, causing dust and rocks to shake off the canyon walls. Cracks formed along the surfaces, sprouting strange, snake-like creatures that slithered along the feet of the Toa. Tahu and Kopaka rushed through the narrow path as it quickly collapsed behind them. After a handful of minutes, they could see the exit. As they ran, they heard the thunderous voice of Makuta calling out to them.
Never forget!
As they began to feel the soft crunch beneath their feet, the two Toa dove out of the pass, landing masks first into a blanket of powdery snow. They both scrambled across the ground to create more distance between them and the canyon, before dropping down and rolling onto their backs while they fought to catch their breath. Soon after, all that remained was a trailing whisper that wormed its way through their ear holes.
I'm still here.
So,
Tahu panted.
the Bohrok nest.
Yeah. Just a few miles from here. I'll show you.
After more than a few minutes of lying in the snow, the Toa embarked on their trip to the base of Mount Ihu. Kopaka was able to relocate the well-hidden opening before they squeezed through the short tunnel that opened up onto the descending hole. They both agreed that little time should be wasted in gathering the other Toa, as this was the closest they had gotten to finding a way to deal with the Bohrok swarms.
Gathering the others should have always been our first priority.
Tahu said as he glanced out toward the distant entrance of Norik's Pass as they traveled along.
I hate you.